The most important thing about GPT 5.5 is not that it's smarter, it's that it needs less from you. That sounds like a small product upgrade. It isn't. For years, a lot of white collar workers have taken comfort in the same quiet assumption. Yes, AI is getting better, but it still needs a human to structure the task, define the context, spot the errors, stitch the outputs together, and carry the thing across the finish line. That assumption is where a huge amount of professional safety has been hiding, and OpenAI's release of GPT 5.5 is another step toward weakening it. OpenAI is explicitly positioning this model as better at figuring out unclear problems, operating software, researching online, analyzing data, creating documents and spreadsheets, and moving across tools until a task is finished. That is not just better answers. That is a more capable substitute for slices of coordination work that used to belong to people. And that distinction matters because most knowledge work is not actually a single act of brilliance. It's not one perfect line of code, one perfect slide, one perfect financial model, one perfect email. It's a chain. Clarify the ask, gather the inputs, translate messy business language into structured work, use 3 tools, fix the obvious mistakes, format the output, chase a missing number, stress test the logic, rewrite it so another department can sign off. When AI gets better at one isolated task, it helps. When AI gets better at the chain, it starts eating jobs from the edges inward. That's why so many professionals feel uneasy even when nothing dramatic has happened to them personally yet. They can feel the center of gravity shifting. The work still arrives, the calendar is still full, the Slack pings are still there. But somewhere underneath all that busyness is a more unsettling question. If the machine increasingly understands what I mean without me explaining every step, then what part of this workflow is truly mine? OpenAI's own language around GPT 5.5 is revealing. They say it understands what you're trying to do faster and can carry more of the work itself. They emphasize gains in agentic coding, computer use, knowledge work, and scientific research. On benchmarks, they're claiming 82.7% on Terminal Bench 2.0, 58.6% on SWE Bench Pro, and 78.7% on OS World Verified, which is basically a way of measuring whether the model can operate real computer environments on its own. Even if you don't care about benchmarks, the direction is obvious. Fewer brittle handoffs, more persistence, more autonomy, more ability to stay on task for longer without a human constantly steering. So let's talk about what this means for your job without the usual nonsense. Not the hype version. Not the AI will replace everyone by Christmas version. Not the nothing to worry about, tools have always changed work version either. Both extremes are lazy. The real story is more uncomfortable because it's less cinematic and more managerial. GPT 5.5 does not mean most professionals wake up unemployed next month. It does mean many roles become easier to compress. That is the phrase I want you to keep in mind. Easier to compress. A company does not need a sci-fi android to cut headcount. It just needs the same output with fewer people, or slightly better output with the same people, and then a very different posture toward hiring. This is where a lot of workers get caught off guard. They imagine displacement as a sudden event. One day employed, next day replaced. But the more common version is slower and colder. Fewer junior openings, smaller teams, fewer agencies, fewer contractors, tighter budgets, a stronger expectation that one person can now do what used to take 2. And above all, much less patience for anyone whose value is mainly, I move information from one system to another and make it look organized. That category includes more people than we like to admit. If your job is built around first draft production, routine analysis, lightweight synthesis, formatting, coordination, documentation, templated communication, or basic transformation of information from one shape into another, GPT 5.5 is not necessarily replacing you, but it is negotiating against you. It is quietly pushing the market to ask why your work takes that long, costs that much, or requires requires that many layers. This is especially important because the current generation of models is no longer being sold as just a writing assistant. OpenAI and outside coverage are both framing GPT 5.5 as a step toward more agentic and intuitive computing, closer to a unified system that can help users across ChatGPT, coding tools, and broader computer-based workflows. That matters because once a model can move between research, documents, spreadsheets, software interfaces, and operational tasks, the practical unit of automation is no longer a paragraph. It's the workflow, and workflows are where a lot of middle-class white-collar security has traditionally lived. Think about the analyst who spends half the week cleaning inputs, summarizing findings, building a deck, and handling revisions. The product manager who turns stakeholder confusion into structured tickets, plans, docs, and status updates. The operations person who translates messy requests into process. The consultant who packages synthesis into a premium-looking narrative. The software engineer whose day is not mostly elegant system design, but reading old code, debugging, testing, refactoring, documenting, and handling glue work. When AI improves at the glue, the economics change long before the title disappears. That's also why entry-level workers should be paying very close attention. The first rung of the ladder has always been built from lower leverage tasks. Drafting, summarizing, QA, research support, documentation, spreadsheet cleanup, ticket handling, junior coding, customer support, internal reporting. Those were never glamorous, but they were the place where people learned the business and slowly earned trust. If AI becomes very good at those starter tasks, the labor market problem is not only replacement, it's starvation of entry points. And we're already seeing hints of that in the data. Anthropic's research on labor market impacts says there's no systematic increase in unemployment yet for highly exposed workers since late 2022, which is important and worth saying clearly. This is not a clean AI-caused mass unemployment story, but they do find suggestive evidence that hiring of younger workers has slowed in exposed occupations, with job finding rates for young workers in those roles down about 14% versus 2022 levels. Their most exposed occupations include computer programmers, customer service representatives, data entry workers, and financial analysts. That should get your attention because those are exactly the kinds of roles where structured digital work is the product. Notice the pattern, not widespread visible collapse, slower hiring, fewer openings, more friction at the beginning, more invisible rejection, more people saying, I'm qualified, I'm applying, I'm not getting traction, and I can't quite tell why. That is what early displacement looks like in a white-collar economy. It doesn't always show up first as layoffs. It often shows up as a missing future. And that missing future has a psychological effect too. Because people can tolerate hard work better than they can tolerate ambiguous status decline. Professionals can deal with long hours. They can deal with demanding managers. What breaks them is the feeling that they are still competent, still conscientious, still doing what they were told, and yet somehow the market is quietly valuing them less. That is the emotional center of this whole conversation. A lot of viewers are not afraid that AI will prove they are bad at their jobs. They are afraid it will prove that being good is no longer enough. Now, let's be precise about who is most exposed. The highest risk zone is not anyone who uses a computer. That's too broad to be useful. The real risk concentrates where 5 things overlap. The work is digital, the output is standardized, the quality can be checked quickly, the context window can be loaded into software, and the economic buyer cares more about speed and adequacy than uniqueness. That is the danger zone. So if you are in customer support, routine analysis, reporting, junior software implementation, content operations, documentation, QA, sales enablement, ad ops, recruiting coordination, certain forms of legal support, paralegal style review, proposal generation, business research, or back office knowledge processing, GPT 5.5 is not just a new tool. It is a margin compressor. If you are in higher trust, relationship heavy, politically complex, cross-functional, client-facing, high accountability work. You are not safe, but you are safer. Safer does not mean immune. It means the model is more likely to augment you before it replaces you, because the hardest part of your job is not producing text or even analysis. It's managing consequences. It's persuasion. It's judgment under uncertainty. It's getting 5 humans with different incentives to move in one direction. It's taking responsibility when the answer is wrong. That last part matters more than people think. Responsibility is a moat. Not a perfect one, but a real one. Many firms are happy to use AI to generate output. Fewer are comfortable letting AI carry the blame. There's another uncomfortable truth here. GPT 5.5 probably hits expensive people in a different way than cheaper people. Junior workers are at risk because starter tasks are automatable. Mid-level workers are at risk because their output is often measurable and compressible. Senior workers are at risk if their compensation reflects old scarcity rather than current leverage. If you are highly paid for doing work that AI now performs at 70% to 85% quality in seconds, your employer doesn't need full replacement to start reconsidering your economics. They just need enough confidence that the remaining gap can be handled by fewer people. This is especially relevant in software and SaaS. For a while, many people comforted themselves with the belief that software engineering would be the last major white-collar domain to feel real pressure, because the work is complex and failure is expensive, and complexity still matters. But GPT 5.5 is being explicitly pushed as OpenAI's strongest agentic coding model so far. That alone won't erase engineering jobs, but it does strengthen the case for leaner teams, more aggressive output expectations, and more willingness to let one strong engineer plus AI cover terrain that used to justify 2 or 3 hires. Now, to stay credible, we also need the counterpoint. Better AI does not automatically mean immediate productivity miracles in the real world. A very important 2025 study from METR found that experienced open source developers actually took 19% longer to complete issues when using AI tools in that particular setting, despite believing the tools made them faster. That is a powerful reminder that benchmark wins and product demos do not instantly translate into smooth operational gains everywhere. Complex code bases, hidden context, quality standards, testing burdens, and review overhead still matter. So no, the story is not AI is now universally better than professionals at real work. That would be sloppy and false. But here's the problem for workers. Your employer does not need AI to be universally better. They need it to be economically good enough in enough cases. That's the threshold. Not perfection, good enough. Not total replacement, enough compression. Not flawless autonomy, less headcount pressure at the margin. And once you see that clearly, a lot of confusing things start making sense. Why companies are still excited even when AI outputs are messy. Why executives keep talking about productivity despite underwhelming ROI. Why hiring stays cautious even when businesses are not in catastrophe mode. Why more workers feel pressure to prove they are using AI effectively even when nobody can clearly define what that means. McKinsey's 2025 workplace research found that nearly all companies are investing in AI, but only 1% describe their deployments as mature. They also found a big gap between what leaders think and what employees are already doing. Employees reported using Gen AI much more than leaders estimate. That is a classic transition moment. The tools are real. The adoption is messy. The org chart hasn't caught up. The metrics are fuzzy. The career consequences are uneven, which means we are in the dangerous middle phase, strong enough to change expectations, not mature enough to create stable new rules, and dangerous middle phases are where careers get scrambled, because markets do not wait for clean theory. They move on vibes, budgets, incentives, and partial evidence. If management believes a team should now be more productive with AI, that belief alone changes how they staff, review, and promote, even before before they fully understand the tool, even before the workflows are redesigned properly, even before anyone has honest numbers. That is why many professionals feel a very specific kind of stress right now. Not just, can AI do my work, but will my company expect more from me because AI exists, whether or not that expectation is fair? The answer in many places is yes. That leads to a second order effect people don't talk about enough. GPT 5.5 doesn't just automate tasks, it changes performance baselines. The dangerous worker in an AI transition is not always the one AI can fully replace. Sometimes it's the worker who doesn't adapt to the new baseline fast enough. The person still taking 2 days to do something that a peer can now do in 2 hours with judgment plus AI. The person who treats AI as cheating or beneath them. The person who uses it badly and creates cleanup work for others. The person who confuses pride in craft with refusal to update process. This is why Learn AI is too shallow as advice. The real question is, where in your workflow does AI reduce friction? Where does it create hidden risk? And where does it change what counts as valuable? Those are 3 different questions. Reducing friction means speed, drafting faster, researching faster, prototyping faster, cleaning faster, summarizing faster. Those are table stakes now. Creating hidden risk means hallucinations, weak reasoning in edge cases, fake confidence, security issues, compliance problems, broken logic, style drift, over-automation, and the very human tendency to trust polished output too much. That matters because the workers who survive this era are not the ones who blindly use AI everywhere. They are the ones who know where it breaks. Changing what counts as valuable is the biggest one. If first drafts get cheap, final judgment gets expensive. If routine coding gets cheaper, system design, debugging instincts, product sense, and ownership get more valuable. If slides get cheaper, narrative framing and decision clarity get more valuable. If research gets cheaper, asking the right question becomes more valuable. If basic execution gets cheaper, trust gets more valuable. In other words, the premium shifts upward. That sounds obvious, but living it is hard because most careers were built in a world where doing your slice of the workflow well was enough. The AI era rewards people who can own outcomes across slices, not just produce artifacts, but define, verify, prioritize, integrate, and communicate. This is not a motivational slogan. It's a labor market adaptation. And yes, there is an unfairness here. Not everyone can instantly reposition into high judgment work. Not every organization rewards that. Not every manager can tell the difference between genuine leverage and polished output. Some people will get squeezed despite doing many things right. That matters. We should say it plainly. AI transitions are not meritocracies. They are power shifts filtered through company politics, timing, geography, industry, and who gets to narrate value inside the firm. So what should you actually do? First, audit your role at the task level, not the title level. Software engineer, analyst, consultant, designer, operations manager. Those labels are too blunt now. Break your week into components. Which tasks are repetitive, which are checkable, which are mostly transforming information, which require real judgment, social capital, or accountability? Which tasks would your boss happily automate if quality stayed acceptable? Which tasks only look important because they used to be time-consuming? This is not a philosophical exercise. It is how you locate your exposure honestly. Second, become extremely good at supervising AI in the parts of your job where the risk of error is manageable and the value of speed is high. That means prompt fluency, yes, but also evaluation fluency. Can you stress test the output? Can you spot weak assumptions? Can you verify numbers? Can you tell when the tone is wrong for the audience? Can you tell when code is elegant but dangerous? The market will not reward used ChatGPT. It will reward used AI to create reliable leverage. Third, move closer to the money. In any company, some work is easier to automate because it is far from revenue, far from customers, and far from consequences. If you can position yourself nearer to decisions, customer pain, product trade-offs, risk management, technical architecture, or directly measurable business outcomes, you improve your odds. Firms protect what they understand they need. They cut what looks interchangeable. Fourth, develop a proof of work trail that survives compression. In a world where everyone can generate polished output, the signal shifts. Can you point to systems improved, revenue influenced, costs reduced, projects shipped, risks avoided, clients retained, incidents resolved? Mere activity becomes weaker evidence. Outcomes become stronger evidence. Quietly, this is becoming one of the most important career habits in white-collar work. Fifth, if you are early in your career, prioritize environments where you can still learn the underlying craft rather than only becoming an AI operator. This is crucial. If the machine does the easy parts and you never build taste, judgment, or mental models, you can end up with a very modern-looking skill set sitting on a very weak foundation. That is a dangerous place to be 5 years from now. Use AI aggressively, but do not outsource your own formation. Sixth, if you manage people, stop measuring value by visible busyness. GPT-5.5 and tools like it will break a lot of old signaling systems. The employee who produces a strong answer quickly with AI may be more valuable than the one who visibly grinds for 12 hours. But the employee who generates endless plausible-looking junk with AI may be worse than the one who works slowly and carefully. Your job as a manager becomes harder, not easier. You now have to judge the quality of leverage, not just the volume of effort. Seventh, don't confuse being AI positive with being strategically awake. Plenty of professionals are enthusiastic and still exposed. Plenty of skeptics are annoyingly right about specific failure modes. What matters is not your vibe. It's whether you can read the map clearly. Where is the tool genuinely shrinking labor demand? Where is it just shifting the shape of the work? Where is it still overhyped? Where is it already changing hiring expectations, even if the tool itself is imperfect? And if you want one simple heuristic, here it is. The more your value comes from being the person who knows what to do next when the problem is unclear, the safer you are. The more your value comes from doing one legible subtask after someone else has already defined the work, the more exposed you are. That's the real meaning of GPT 5.5. Not that AI became magical overnight, not that your career is over, not that every white-collar job is doomed. It means the market just got another reminder that ambiguity handling, tool use, synthesis, and digital execution are increasingly software-shaped capabilities. And when software absorbs more of those capabilities, the premium shifts toward ownership, judgment, accountability, and domain depth. A lot of people will respond to this news with either denial or panic. I think both are mistakes. Denial makes you slow. Panic makes you sloppy. The better response is to become more specific, more precise about where you create value, more deliberate about what you delegate to AI, more honest about which parts of your role are commodity, more protective of the parts that are not, because the old career bargain is fading. Do your job well, be dependable, accumulate experience, and the market will gradually reward you. That model has been weakening for a while. AI doesn't create that trend by itself, but it accelerates it. The new bargain is harsher. Show that you can create leverage. Show that you can absorb new tools without losing judgment. Show that you can own outcomes under changing conditions. Show that you are not just expensive labor, but useful force multiplication. That is a more demanding world. It is also, strangely, a clarifying one. GPT 5.5 is another signal that the era of protected routine knowledge work is ending. Not all at once, not everywhere, not fairly, but visibly. And once you accept that, you stop asking the soft question, will AI take my job? And start asking the better one, which parts of my work are becoming cheaper and which parts of me are becoming more valuable? That question is not pleasant, but it is useful. And right now, useful is worth a lot. If you want, stay with me for the next one. We'll keep mapping this shift carefully without the noise.